Welcome to the Deficient Vegans podcast. This is episode 59. I'm the muscle deficient vegan here with the protein deficient vegan. Do you want to say hi?
Hi.
Hi, everybody. So last week we covered all the human health, environmental, and worker safety issues associated with pig waste from factory farming. And today we're going to be covering everything from the pig's perspective. The episode might be a little triggering if you're sensitive to animal welfare topics. So we are going to cover a couple of things about the pig experience, but we're not going to go into a lot of horrific detail or anything like that.
Yeah, and we'll give trigger warnings before we get to the part.
Yeah. But first up, new news.
New news.
So the first piece of news we have here is from our friends at Faunalytics, who we are big fans of these days. But they did a recent study called The Multi-Generational Kitchen, How to Market Plant-Based Eating to Indian Gen Z Households. So Faunalytics surveyed hundreds of Indian Gen Z adults about household food dynamics, food choice motivations, and familiarity with plant-based products. They also asked them about barriers to plant-based eating.
In the survey of 801 Gen Z adults between the ages of 18 and 28 that are still living with their parents in India, 58% identified as a type of meat reducer, which could be vegan, vegetarian, pescatarian, or a new one for us is reducitarian.
Yeah, I hadn't heard of a reducitarian before we looked into this, but I guess it's just somebody who is reducing their meat consumption in some way, but not necessarily like a strict system like pescatarian or something.
Isn't fitting into a label yet.
Right. No, which is still good.
Yeah,
Progress
still good.
is good. Only 42% of those self-identified as an omnivore, and half were open to going vegan.
That's a really good number.
Yeah, hopefully they follow through. So 50% of the participants who weren't already vegan said they were either likely, very likely, or extremely likely to go vegan in the next year. And 53% of those believe their parents were even likely to do the same, which seems extremely high to me. Maybe they're just really ambitious, but I hope they can get it done.
Yeah. So I think it would be 50% of the people who aren't already reducing their animal consumption could see themselves going vegan the next year, and then half of those people, right, would see their parents. So 25% can also see their parents doing it. Yeah, it's a very high number.
Yeah. So in the survey, they were asked what the biggest barriers were for eating plant-based for them. 59%, which is the majority, said needed more information about plant-based diets. And this is another one where they could select multiple options. So these aren't going to add up to 100 or anything. But more information about plant-based diets is definitely something we can help out with. 37% worrying about their family perceiving it as abandoning their culture for a Western vegan diet.
I think that makes sense because, India is very vegetarian friendly, I would say.
Yeah.
But they do rely pretty heavily on dairy in a lot of their food.
Yeah. And, leading into that, 54% of those people said viewing dairy as a core part of one's cultural identity was a barrier to plant-based eating.
That's a pretty big number.
Giving up dairy, from what I understand, is a pretty big deal in India. So I know a lot of people we see and talk with that are in that environment struggle with that kind of thing. 53% said needing to go food shopping more often.
I thought this one was interesting because I assume that means produce.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily think I eat more produce than I did before I was vegetarian. And I'm even thinking back to when I was living with my family who are all omnivores, I feel like they eat about the same amount of produce as we do.
Yeah. Maybe that's because we had a fairly balanced diet anyway, because I feel like I've always had some kind of fruits and some kind of produce around. I know there are a lot of households who are not necessarily like that. But yeah, I'm in the same boat as you. I don't really feel like my fresh produce has gone up since going vegan.
Yeah. But, I think some of that is, I'm not saying it's the same for this study, but I think there is some of it where it's I don't necessarily know what vegans eat. And you just kind of assume they're eating a lot of vegetables and fruits instead of just what happened, at least for me, is I replaced eggs and dairy with tofu, TVP, and seitan.
Yeah. Well, it's also possible, in India, maybe a vegan diet is more predominantly fresh produce than it is in an Americanized vegan diet. So,
I guess that could definitely be the case.
Yeah. 52% said personal health concerns other than iron or protein. So those are kind of the big ones. So they're talking about health concerns other than those things. And then 52% also said they believe there wouldn't be enough choice when dining out.
Yeah. I mean, that's fair.
I'm surprised that one's not higher. It would probably be higher if they knew the reality.
Yeah. Although I guess I don't really know, what restaurants are like in India. So.
No, that's true. That's a good point. Yeah. They also identified 3 different types of Gen Z Indian consumers. So The three types they broke them down into were game changers, who were most open to change, stronger household influence, fewer barriers; constrained consumers who want to change their diet, but they face many barriers; and then indifferent consumers who are like not really interested in plant-based, or they have low household influence, or they're like not peer-driven or motivated. So they don't really care about whether or not they're vegan, I guess.
So for some demographics on the game changers group, the average age was 24, 63% women, 79% Hindu, 71% general caste, 58% bachelor's degree, 58% full-time workers, and 43% right-wing.
For the constrained consumers, so they were an average age of 23 years old, significantly less women. This one was only 42% women compared to the 63% in the game changers. A lot of the other stuff was kind of similar. 74% Hindu, 56% general caste, down to 46% with a bachelor's degree, 56% full-time workers, and 53% right-wing. So yeah, in general, substantially fewer women, slightly fewer bachelor's degrees, and slightly more right-wing.
For the indifferent consumers, the average age was 22 years old. There were 46% women, 67% Hindu, 50% general caste, 45% bachelor's degree, 33% full-time workers, and 34% right-wing.
So the full-time workers were less likely to be indifferent.
I mean, that makes sense because they can make their own choices about what they're spending money on, right?
Yeah, I can see people who are like, I have a lot of other things to worry about. I don't really care about this plant-based thing.
Yeah, I think it also goes with what you were saying early on, which was like that the indifferent consumers have low household influence. So maybe that's related to not working full-time.
The study did have some recommendations for advocates of veganism, or people who want to push, let's be more plant-based. They recommend framing veganism as an inclusive and intersectional social justice movement grounded in public health, environmental sustainability, ethics, and animal welfare, while avoiding associations with caste-based purity politics.
They also recommend educating Gen Z Indians on the health benefits of a plant-based diet and providing practical information on plant-based grocery shopping and dining out to overcome common barriers.
Yeah. And then, not to toot our own horn, but this is a lot of the material that we like to put out is like, okay, what can I get at the grocery store? What can I get when I'm out at a restaurant? What are some recipes I can make, protein-deficient vegan recipes? These are, I think, one of the best ways to help people go vegan, because food, like I've said a couple times, is like the thing you hit 3 times a day when you're trying to adopt veganism.
And it's one of those things where if food's the only obstacle, like we can help with that. And I will say, I think like laying the groundwork of understanding like what would you eat on a plant-based diet? How do you eat out at restaurants? How do you grocery shop?
Yeah.
Like laying that foundation and then working on the other piece, I think is important because you're already like, cracking through the wall.
Yeah, for sure. And that leads into their next recommendation, which is that you should frame plant-based cooking and recipes as like collaborative, tasty, and healthy for the entire family. So it shouldn't really be something where it's like, I'm making my little vegan dish over here. It's like, hey, we should all be eating more plants because it's healthy. We can learn to make new things together. I mean, I'm sure some families will have no interest in that, but there are a couple of different angles you can approach it from, especially in a culture where a family and being together is like such a big part of it.
Yeah. I mean, that makes sense.
They also said one promising strategy is to collaborate with health experts and fitness influencers to promote plant-based eating on their personal social media channels.
I thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah. So, I'm a personal trainer. I try to put out like vegan-focused nutrition information along with the fitness information that I put out. So I obviously think that this is also valuable.
Yeah. They recommend using different social media influencers to target constrained consumers and game changers.
And then their last recommendation was target the dairy industry specifically, which again, I think is because dairy is such a huge deal in India.
Right. And I think just because there's so many dishes that are already vegetarian, it's like an easy one to knock down first.
So, overall, it was a really interesting study. We'll have a link to it in the show notes if you want to read more, or if maybe you're Indian or you have some, family that are in India. It could be interesting to share and discuss. So the next piece of news we have is about virtual mice.
What?
Yeah. I don't want to butcher their name, but Jiming Wu is a doctoral student in the Nanomaterials in Health and Technology and Society labs at IMPA, Switzerland. They developed a virtual mouse to reduce or maybe eventually replace animal testing. So this is basically like a digital representation of a mouse and like their biological systems and all the things you would normally test when you're doing like some kind of medicine testing or food testing or something like that.
Which makes sense because we've already tested the shit out of mice. Like, do we need to keep doing it? Like, shouldn't we already have enough information?
Yeah.
And I think AI is driving a lot of this.
That's what it looked like.
Yeah.
So, I know there are some issues with that as well, but if they can use a little AI to stop testing on animals in some cases, I don't know, maybe that trade-off makes
Feels
more
like a
sense
good
down the
trade-off,
road.
in my opinion, but
So, we'll see how it goes.
I don't necessarily think you need AI to make your vegan restaurant slot menus, but for a scientific breakthrough, it seems like it's worth it.
Yeah. Cool. So, we'll be looking forward to seeing more about that. And we'll also have a link to that article down in the show notes as well. And then last up, a court in Argentina has recognized 2 goldfish as sentient beings with rights.
This is cool.
Yeah. And a really interesting story. So there were 2 goldfish that were in a small glass display in a sushi restaurant in Buenos Aires. And then there was a person, I don't want to pronounce another name here, Wallace Vacias, decided to file a complaint with the courts. He argued that the conditions of the fish violated a law against animal abuse in Argentina, which is an interesting angle. So,
Yeah.
At the beginning of the case, they requested that in addition to removing the fish to a safe and suitable location, they be declared subjects of law or sentient beings. So basically, instead of just being recognized as objects, they become beings with rights under the law. And the ruling sets a precedent for similar animals in inadequate conditions.
Yeah, I could see this, maybe working with like zoos or like a lot of things, really.
Yeah. And I know we had talked before about an island where some dolphins were basically granted personhood.
Yeah.
It is cool to see like things like this happening. It's interesting.
Yeah. Part of me thinks like a lot of the strides are going to be made in court.
Yeah.
Versus like changing like individual minds one at a time.
Yeah.
It's like if we can actually get some laws set down, that we can do a lot with that.
Yeah, definitely.
During last week's episode, we covered what happens to the waste from 73 to 75 million pigs that are currently living in factory farms in the U.S. We talked about how it impacted neighboring communities, drinking water, human health, environmental, nearby aquatic life, and worker safety. But today, we're going to talk about the experience of the 73 to 75 million pigs in the U.S. right now. We will not be covering the topic of slaughterhouse or the transportation to the slaughterhouse because has a lot going on there, and this episode's probably already going to be a little long.
Yeah.
And I personally think it deserves its own episode.
Yeah, it's definitely a different topic. This is mostly about welfare conditions on the farm.
Yeah. We will call out the section that contains trigger warnings so that you can pause it or skip ahead if you need to.
So most people's perception of pigs is really misguided. You'll hear that they're like dirty, unintelligent, stinky farm animals, which is not really the case. So let's talk about a few of those and talk about where the misconceptions came from.
Historically, pigs have been kept around human waste, garbage, in muddy lots, and cramped pens. The environments that they're kept in are dirty, but that's because people have confined a bunch of pigs to a very small area.
Yeah, it would be pretty dirty too if you're crammed into a room with 100 other people.
Yeah, never allowed to leave it. Yeah, just like imagine you had 10 puppies and you put them in a tiny little pen and never took them outside to the bathroom.
Yeah.
They'd get pretty gross and dirty as well.
Yeah, and I think modern pig farms today have reinforced this image because they house like thousands of pigs, sometimes tens of thousands of pigs indoors. So they're all crammed together. They're on like concrete or slatted floors, like we talked about last week, over top of the manure pits. So, and the idea there is like they just go to the bathroom all over the floor, and then eventually like it's not even that it like falls down through the pit.
Right.
Like, they're not going to the bathroom over the hole in the floor.
No.
They like go to the bathroom, and then eventually they like lay on it or step on it, and it like pushes it through the slats eventually. So they're just like covered in all kinds of crazy stuff. They also don't have enough space to separate their resting area from the area where they do go to the bathroom because pigs don't really like those to be the same area.
Yeah. So what are they naturally like? Both wild and domesticated pigs with enough space are actually very clean animals. They create separate areas for their sleeping, eating, and the space where they would go to the bathroom. And they actually very intentionally avoid defecating and urinating in spaces where they would rest. And if they've got enough room, they will do that.
Yeah, which they don't have the option to do in a factory farm environment.
Right. Pigs do wallow in the mud, though, which is funny because you'll hear people say, oh, I'm sweating like a pig, but pigs don't actually sweat very much at all, which is why they wallow in mud.
Yeah.
It cools their body, and it protects them from sunburns, repels insects and parasites, and also soothes any skin irritation.
It's really interesting. So I use it kind of like a lotion / sunscreen.
Yeah.
I wonder if they work for us.
It's like a lotion, sunscreen, and air conditioning.
can I just go roll in the mud before a hot day outside? Do you think it would work?
If you want to, you can do whatever you want.
I wonder if it works. I'll have to try it out.
Go for it.
So people also tend to think that pigs are dumb. So let's talk about the reality of that. Historically, we've never really put pigs in a position to show how smart they are. With dogs, which are more typically pets, we teach them like tricks and interact with them and have them go fetch, things like that. But with pigs, we just kind of treat them like numbers. Like you have 100 pigs, you're pig 42. Like I don't know if you do tricks or not. Right?
Yeah.
So they are rarely known by anyone as individuals. I mean, I'm sure there are some small farm cases where the kid has a favorite pig for a little while, but outside of that, in a factory farm situation, that's not really a thing. We've also put almost no effort into understanding their cognitive abilities because they've mostly been used for food.
Dogs or cats are so close to humans. We live with them. We've been able to observe how they interact and what they do, and you can train them tricks, but that's just not how pigs are kept. I think also in general, people kind of prefer to think of the animals that they're eating as dumb so they can feel a little better about it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's I think that most people would be put off from eating a monkey, like you said, because we share so many characteristics with monkeys.
Right.
And I think that also be put off by eating dogs because, dogs are intelligent. Maybe you've had a dog that's a pet and you've, seen how they relate to you. They can read your emotions and stuff. And it's that's probably one of the big reasons why you wouldn't want to eat a dog. I've also heard the word dumb being used to describe cows and chickens, other farm animals. I just feel it's a very common phrase used to describe farm animals, almost to discount why they should not be eaten, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, like chickens, like bird brain, stuff like that.
Right, yeah.
So as far as intelligence, what's kind of the truth here for the studies and stuff we have done? So modern research actually shows that pigs can do a lot of interesting things. They can remember objects. So there was one study that exposed pigs to a sample object for 2 days, and they remembered the object for at least 5 days after that. And interestingly, they prefer new objects to ones they've already seen. So like humans, they kind of seek out novelty. I think that's really cool.
They're just curious little dudes.
Yeah, they're like, I've already played with that toy. Give me a new toy.
Yeah, I want a new toy. I constantly want new toys. They also can solve puzzles and navigate mazes, especially if it's for food rewards.
They can also remember solutions for long periods of time, especially with food searching tasks.
Yeah, food's a big one here.
Yeah. And they can recognize individual people. So
I thought that was cool.
If there's food to be found, the pig will find it, and they will remember how to find it in the future.
They got excellent little noses and really good little brains.
Yeah.
They can also, this one I thought was really cool. So they can also use mirrors to locate hidden food.
Yeah.
Now, one of the signs of intelligence with, I think, monkeys is that they can recognize themselves in the mirror.
Yeah.
So they haven't found that with pigs yet, but one study, after 5 hours spent with a mirror, the pigs were shown a familiar food bowl, visible in the mirror only, but hidden behind a solid barrier. 7 out of 8 of the pigs found the food bowl in an average of 23 seconds by going away from the mirror and around the barrier.
I know people who couldn't do that fast.
I know. We get into this later, but compare them to the intelligent level of a 3-year-old.
Yeah.
I feel like not many 3-year-olds could do that. I'm going to be honest.
Yeah, that'd be tricky, I think. Never tried it, but that seems like...
But this is also they haven't been introduced to a mirror before.
Yeah.
I think is the big one, right?
Right.
So they showed naive pigs the same thing, and they just kind of went and looked behind the mirror. So it proves that they can learn after, 5 hours?
Yeah.
They figured out how a mirror works.
Yeah. And naive pig in this context means a pig that hasn't done the experiment before. They've never seen a mirror before. They don't know how it works.
But pigs can figure out how mirrors work? I just think that's crazy.
That is crazy. They can also understand symbolic cues. So basically like a picture or a symbol on a card to represent food or water or something like that. They can learn from other pigs. That's pretty cool.
That is really cool.
Yeah.
They have perception of time and the ability to anticipate future events. So a study was done where female pigs were given 2 crate options with different confinement times. So one crate option was 30 minutes of confinement and the other crate option was 240 minutes in confinement, and they showed an overall preference for the shorter confinement time.
To me, this one seems like really intelligent. I don't know
Yeah.
like what the scales are or where this falls, but being able to like predict like, oh, this is a crate where I have to sit around for much longer.
That's crazy.
That's like much more than just instinct of it.
Yeah, I think it shows they can get bored.
Yeah.
Like, I was like really bored in that one.
Yeah, like I remember I was really bored for a really long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny because similarly, I think I read once that dogs can kind of predict what time you're coming home, but it was more based on scent.
Yeah.
Like they have like a real good instinct of like, oh, well, like my human the air doesn't smell like as much like my human as it did when they left, and now I know like when it gets to that low point, they're probably coming home from work.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, but like still kind of a different perception of time. But the time perception, I think, is
Yeah, they don't exactly have wristwatches.
yeah. I mean, I think that's like pretty interesting.
It is interesting.
It shows that they're probably like thinking and they're like bored and like, when am I going to get out of here? This is like awful.
Yeah. They can also learn a joystick and computer tasks. So pigs can play video games, more or less. It doesn't say that, but I am extrapolating that pigs can play video games based off the fact that they can learn a joystick and can do computer tasks.
I'm imagining a pig playing video games, and that's fucking adorable. Can you imagine it?
No.
Like the little pig from Babe playing video games like Pac-Man?
Yeah.
Adorable.
Except instead of the little Pac-Man noise, like the blop, 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 they go oink, 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 oink.
Oink, 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 oink.
I like it. They can also engage in social play, like shaking or carrying an object like a ball or stick.
Just like a dog.
Yeah. They, from everything I've read about pigs, they seem very similar to dogs.
I know. I kind of like want a pig.
Very large dogs.
Very, very large dogs. And then some researchers, like Cambridge's Donald Broom, have said that pigs can be cognitively more sophisticated than 3-year-old humans.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
It is crazy. They're also, like kind of like I was just talking about, comparable to dogs on intelligence. They typically will match them on a lot of tasks or even beat them on some memory and problem-solving specific tasks. And that's from a study from 2015, which we'll also link in the show notes. And then again, Donald Broom from Cambridge argued that pigs can be even more cognitively sophisticated than dogs because they communicate differently. Dogs will wag their tails, make eye contact, and seek out praise, but pigs actually communicate through like vocalizations, scent, body posture, and touch. So it's a lot more kind of nuanced method of communicating, but it also includes vocalizations, which is really interesting. I mean, obviously dogs bark.
Yeah.
But, the pigs kind of do a little bit of everything.
I think, right, because I think when dogs bark, it's kind of hard to tell, like, are you happy? Are you wanting something? But, like, I feel like when pigs get excited, like, you can tell from their voices, even if you haven't been around pigs much, it's like you can kind of tell, like, oh, that's like joy, that's excitement.
Right. Yeah. These differences also lead to people underestimating them because they're not quite as obvious that they're intelligent based on their behaviors, but they have their own way of doing these communicative behaviors.
Yeah. You just need to understand the pig, and then you'll see how smart they are.
That's right. Be one with the pig.
Be one with the pig. What was that? Baram you.
Yeah.
I don't remember what that means.
It was really cool. It was a battle cry.
Yeah, for the sheep, right?
Yeah.
Baram you.
Yeah, it meant something. I don't remember. We'll have to watch it again, I guess.
We need to watch Babe again.
Shucks.
Such a good movie. So another thing you might hear is that pigs will eat anything, or like the common phrase of you eat like a pig.
Yeah.
Historically, pigs have been given scraps, so families would feed them vegetable scraps or stale bread, spoiled produce, or like any kitchen leftovers.
Yeah.
So since pigs would eat the things that humans wouldn't eat, humans are just assuming that they'll eat anything.
No. And to be fair, the pigs will eat anything.
I learned that from Hannibal.
Yeah. That's just not what they want to eat.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, like, the obvious thing here to me is, like, if they're eating anything you give them, it's probably because they're hungry.
Yeah.
So maybe if you gave them some of their food preferences, they wouldn't just eat everything.
Yeah. I mean, humans will eat pretty close to anything if they get hungry enough.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So modern farm pigs are fed a calorie-dense feed, and they've also been selectively bred for rapid growth and efficient weight gain.
Yeah.
So they overeat basically because humans have genetically bred them to overeat, and that's all they have to do all day in their little cage.
Yeah. These genius little pigs can't do anything else, so it's like, what else am I going to do? I'm bored as fuck.
Yeah.
I'm going to eat. I eat when I'm bored as fuck.
So what are the pigs like in nature then, if they are not force-fed these calorie-dense feeds?
So pigs are opportunistic omnivores in nature, which means that they will kind of eat anything, but they do actually have food preferences, and they like to explore different things with their little snouts. And they'll sniff, lick, and mouth unfamiliar objects to see like what's going on with them, even if they aren't planning on eating them.
Yeah. And the wild boar do tend to stay leaner. Their intake rises and falls with what's seasonally available. So they will like fatten up in the fall with acorns before the winter. So they have, extra calories to burn over the winter when it's harder to find food and stuff.
Right, because they're smart and they know there's not going to be as much food.
Right. But they're not eating like unlimited food year round.
Yeah, and they're having to walk a lot to find food too.
Yeah,
so that probably helps lean them out.
Yeah, for sure. Plus, if they're picky, they're walking a lot to find the berries they like.
Right.
I don't know if they eat berries, but to find the thing they like.
Yeah, I'm just thinking like, this makes sense from what I've heard about pigs and like truffle hunting and stuff. It's like, they have very good noses.
Yeah.
They can figure out what they want to eat.
Yeah. So most of the like unkind pig stereotypes are basically human manufactured or based on like misunderstandings.
Yeah.
So it's like, maybe a pig on a farm is dirty and they eat a whole bunch of stuff, but that's because that's like the only option we've given them.
Yeah, you put them in that position and now you're making fun of them.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah. That is sad when you put it that way.
Yeah. So now that we've covered how intelligent and clean pigs are, let's talk about how they are as individuals, because I think this piece might be one of the most interesting pieces.
Yeah.
Studies have shown that pigs show optimism and pessimism.
That's interesting.
So, like, they can kind of, like, predict if something's going to be good or bad.
Yeah.
I was also reading that apparently they can tell optimism and pessimism from, like, the other pigs that are around. Like, if they're showing, like, optimism, like, they're excited about something, like, maybe they're getting, like, food reward or something, like, one pig that doesn't know the food reward's coming can pick up on that behavior and know that, like, something exciting's happening.
So can a grumpy pig bring down the whole vibe?
Probably. I think, actually. Yeah. I did read that. It's true.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Not really grumpy, but, like, depressed.
Yeah.
They also experience stress and can become very anxious.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think almost all animals have like stress responses.
Yeah.
You were talking about depressed. They can develop depression-like symptoms and behaviors under poor conditions. So it's not like they don't care what condition they're in. Like if you put them in a bad condition, they will get actively depressed.
Yeah. Same.
They'll also comfort pigs they're familiar with. So if they notice that a pig is depressed and they know the pig, they'll be like, "Hey, what's up, buddy? What's got you down today? Do you want some food?"
So pigs are really sweet too. Yeah, and they can recognize individual pigs and also individual humans.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. I was reading if there's a human they like, they will show more interest in them versus a human that they don't like.
Yeah. And this is kind of what you were talking about, but they can also experience emotional contagion, which is basically like witnessing an emotion in another pig, and then they start to feel that way.
Yeah. It's basically empathy.
Yeah, exactly.
Pigs are empathetic. Isn't that cool?
That is cool. And so there was a study for this where some naive test pigs, and again, naive just means like they haven't been put in this situation before. They're not familiar with it. So some naive test pigs were exposed to pen mates who had been trained to anticipate upcoming rewarding events, like receiving straw and chocolate raisins.
Can't give that to a dog.
Yeah, that's true. Or aversive events, bad events, like social isolation. When the naive pigs were placed in the company of the trained pigs, they adopted the same emotional anticipatory behaviors, like their ear and tail postures and increased cortisol release, as the trained pigs who did have the direct experience.
I think that's so interesting.
So yeah, they get in a group, and there's like the group that's familiar with, like, they're about to get the chocolate-covered raisins. They all get really excited, and this new pig who doesn't know what's going on, they're like, "Oh, I'm excited. Why am I excited? I don't know. Something good's about to happen."
Yeah.
And then also the other way around for bad stuff.
It's like really interesting. Like, I think that shows a lot of intelligence too.
Yeah.
Just that you can like pick up the vibes around you.
Yeah. Every pig also has an individual personality.
Researchers have described differences in boldness, curiosity, sociability, playfulness, exploration, aggression, and fearfulness. So, like, they're all different on all of those different personality traits.
Yeah, it's like it's like other animals that people have traditionally kept as pets, like dogs or cats. Everybody who's ever had a pet knows that even within the same breed or like even like siblings in the same litter can have really different personalities.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, pigs are no different.
They're just little individuals.
Out in nature, the pigs naturally live in their family groups and like multi-generational groups even, close like mother-offspring relationships, and adult males will often leave the family.
What a shocker. No, but the females actually stay together for years and like raise the next generation of pigs, which I thought was really sweet.
I wonder how many other animals are like that.
It kind of sounds a little matriarchal.
So next, let's talk about like what a pig wants or what a pig needs.
What a pig wants, what a pig needs.
I think that was the actual original lyric.
I think it was too.
And then they had to change it for the radio or something.
Yeah, they were like, no one's going to get this.
Yeah.
Nobody knows what pigs want and what pigs need, but I think she should have went with the original.
Yeah, me too. And so that versus what they actually get in a factory farm.
So what do they need?
So in the wild, they need to be able to root around with their noses.
Their cute little noses?
Yeah.
Their little snouts?
Yeah. And I know this maybe doesn't sound like a need, but this actually is a thing that pigs need to be able to do, or they start getting like pretty aggressive and depressed and sad. So this is a really big part of being a pig.
Well, the pig's snout is actually the most sensitive organ in their body, and they have an excellent sense of smell, so that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. They'll spend hours every day digging, rooting, searching around for roots, insects, bulbs, mushrooms, seeds, and you've heard about like the pig truffle hunting.
Yeah.
That's definitely real.
What was that? Isn't there like a Nicolas Cage movie about like a truffle hunting pig?
I think there's a Nicolas Cage movie about everything, so I would assume so, but I'm not familiar with the movie.
I can't remember it. I think I watched it with my parents, though.
If there is one, I'm sure it's amazing, and we need to watch it.
Yeah.
They don't do it just for entertainment. It is like an essential behavioral need for the pigs.
Yeah, if they don't get to root around with their nose, they have increased frustration. They can start behaving abnormally, such as like biting their tails, and just their aggression levels overall increase.
Yeah, they'll like start biting other pigs' ears and getting fights and all kinds of crazy.
I mean, that makes sense. They're highly intelligent. Like, this is one of the things that they do to explore the world, you know?
If somebody locks a person in a cage or like a cage, like a padded room or whatever, like they're going to get pretty aggressive.
You're going to get a little aggressive. Yeah, I mean, it's like these are highly intelligent animals. Like, part of the way they show intelligence in the wild is by exploring things and like sniffing things out, like discovering new foods. And it's like, yeah, if they can't do that, that's a problem.
Yeah, I think I'd act the same way.
I would too.
Pigs also need to be able to explore in general. In the wild, pigs are constantly investigating smells, sounds, and textures because they're naturally very curious animals. There is literally nothing for a pig to do or explore in a factory farm.
Yeah.
They can often not even like walk around really. So
sometimes they can't even turn around.
Yeah.
So, you know.
And they can't smell anything because the smells are all overwhelmed by like the disgusting smell of the indoor facility. Right. So.
Yeah, exploration and discovery are also critical for like healthy development of pigs. Just imagine like locking up your pet, your cat, your dog in a tiny cage that they could never, ever, ever leave. Like, just imagine how they would act.
Yeah, not great, I would think.
No.
And also kind of like we touched on earlier, pigs really want to be clean. They need to be given enough area to have different spaces for eating, sleeping, going to the bathroom, just like humans and dogs. And also, since like we talked about earlier, they do have special things they need for temperature regulation, which is not only the wallowing in the mud, but also shade and water are really, really important for a pig.
Yeah, they need those things to cool down and also protect them from the sun and bugs. And because if you think about it, like pig skin is kind of like our skin, like it's not protected by fur.
Yeah.
And like think about how our skin interacts with like the sun without sunscreen and stuff.
As an aside, if you're finding this podcast interesting and you're not already subscribed, we'd appreciate it if you would subscribe. Maybe if you're listening on YouTube, you can give us a like. That really helps us out.
So now for the trigger warning, we are going to be talking about the actual reality of most factory farms in the U.S. But for some perspective first, so wild boars generally live 4 to 5 years, but some can actually survive up to 10 years in the wild. However, domesticated pigs, like the ones that you'll find in factory farms, can live between 10 and 15 years naturally.
Sometimes up to 20 years if they're really well cared for.
In contrast, pigs on a factory farm only live to an average of 6 months old.
That is super sad.
It is very sad.
This is actually one of the things that in all these conversations about factory farm animals and like how they're treated so well and their farmers like take care of them, that's the part that really gets to me the most. It's like no matter how well they're treated, like chickens are living like 39 days or something.
Yeah.
Pigs are 6 months. Cows are a very short
Like-
percentage of their life. Like it doesn't matter how well you're treating the animal if you're cutting its life down by like a tenth every time.
Oh, I know. Yeah, they could naturally live maybe up to 20 years and you're letting them live half of a year.
Yeah.
They don't even get to like, I don't know, probably full brain functionality and like understanding things before they're gone.
Yeah.
It's very sad.
Yeah.
Female pigs that are used for breeding, they usually live to be about 2 to 3 years old. But of course, like they're being constantly bred over and over again during those 2 to 3 years. So it's like not a good time.
Yeah.
From a very detailed study on the welfare of pigs that we will link in the show notes. This is from the European Food Safety Authority, the EFSA panel on animal health and welfare. The 16 highly relevant welfare consequences identified are restriction of movement, resting problems, group stress, isolation stress, separation stress, inability to perform exploratory or foraging behavior, inability to express maternal behavior, inability to perform sucking behavior, prolonged hunger, prolonged thirst, heat stress, cold stress, locomotory disorders, including lameness, soft tissue lesions, and integument damage, respiratory disorders, and gastroenteric disorders. Of these, only inability to perform exploratory or foraging behavior was considered highly relevant for all pig categories under consideration.
Right. And that's because basically no matter what else is going on, they can't move around much.
Yeah. So we're going to cover a lot of this in more detail, starting with the amount of space that most pigs have.
Yeah. So there are a couple of different ways that pigs are kept. A couple of those are also crates. So the first one is a gestation crate, which houses individual pregnant sows, which are female pigs. It's only about 7 feet by 2 feet. And just like that might sound big to you, 7 feet, but you should know that pregnant pigs are about 7 feet long.
Yeah.
And then about 2 feet in width. So this is basically the size of the pig.
Right. They have virtually no space.
Right. And it is only 3 or 4 feet tall as well.
Yeah. They're confined there for most of their 114-day pregnancy and move to farrowing crates shortly before giving birth. The floors are typically bare and slatted with either concrete, metal, or plastic so that waste can drop down, and there's no nesting materials.
Next is farrowing crates, which are metal enclosures used to house the mother sows just before giving birth and also while nursing. So they basically move from the gestation crate to the farrowing crate right before they give birth, and then the babies are in there with them. They're usually around the same dimension as the gestation crate. And yeah, they usually get moved into the crate a few days before giving birth and remain there for like 3 to 4 weeks while nursing the babies. The sides of the crate are designed with gaps so the piglets can safely access the mother to nurse and not be crushed. So the mother pig is inside the crate with the slats and the baby pigs are outside of it.
Right. And factory farms will say that they need farrowing crates to keep the mother from accidentally crushing the babies. But in nature, this is like much less of a concern because the mother pigs actually possess very strong maternal instincts and deliberately build safe, contoured nests which gently guide their babies from danger. So like, yes, crushing happens in nature, but it's like a lot less likely. And so the baby crushing problem the factory farms are trying to fix is oddly enough the one that they've pretty much created in the first place by not allowing the mother pig to have enough room and space and resources to build a nest like she would in the wild. So they kind of are like, hey, the mother pig is like so careless and keeps crushing her babies. And it's like, oh, well, you keep giving her no place to move.
Right. I mean, they're in this crate. Like where would the babies go?
Yeah. Where the mother can't even move. Like you're blaming her for crushing the babies.
Yeah. And then, so for the actual facilities themselves, typically they use finishing barns is what they call it, which is basically a large confinement house designed to hold about 1,000 to 2,500 pigs at once. The pigs enter the barns around 40 to 60 pounds and then spend the next 4 months there until they weigh about 270, 280 pounds. And then they are shipped off for the slaughter.
Yeah.
Those buildings also have the slatted floors, and each pig only has about 7.5 to 8 square feet of space, which is basically like a 2.5 foot by 2.5 foot box for a 280-pound pig.
Yeah, which is crazy because like we're recording the podcast, we're sitting in like rolling chairs, right? And like I think we're each taking up more space than the pig has.
Yeah.
Right, just like where our legs are positioned and like the width and stuff of the chair.
Right, yeah. I can't imagine a 280-pound pig being on the floor under my chair.
No, it's insane.
Yeah.
And then they're also like squished, right? Because it's not like they're just like all on top of each other, basically.
Right.
So if you're part of our book club, you've already probably read this, but we really like. By the way, we really like the book Eating Animals. It's a really good place to start if you don't know a lot about this stuff. I'm going to read an excerpt from the book Eating Animals. A study by the European Commission's Scientific Veterinary Committee documented that pigs in crates showed weakened bones, higher risk of leg injuries, cardiovascular problems, urinary infections, and a reduction in muscle mass, so severe that it affected the pig's ability to lie down. Other studies indicate that poor genetics, lack of movement, and poor nutrition leave 10 to 40% of pigs structurally unsound due to such conditions as buckling of the knees, bowed legs, and pigeon toes. An industry periodical, National Hog Farmer, has reported that 7% of breeding sows typically die prematurely from the stress of confinement and intensive breeding. In some operations, the mortality rate exceeds 15%.
That sounds pretty bleak. And, a lot of the issues with like the crushing or whatever, it's like they can't even use their legs to stand up. They can't lie down with any control. So like they just don't have any options here for like how to move around or be safe or anything.
Right. I mean, which makes sense because it's like, you think about if you were forced to lay down constantly and could barely move and stuff, like obviously your muscles aren't going to work properly.
Right.
Because you're not moving around. You're not getting like any exercise at all.
Yeah. So another thing about the facilities is the flooring. We talked about it a little bit, but it's typically concrete, metal, or plastic. There are no bedding materials at all in most of these facilities. And then they also have the partially slatted floors.
Right.
So the impacts of this are like the joint problems and the lameness, which basically means you can't walk around properly, the lesions and the abrasions, because they have constant friction against like the hard surfaces. There's no soft hay or like material, obviously no fabrics or anything like, to keep them from rubbing up against stuff.
And think like they have skin like us.
Yeah. Right.
So like imagine having to lay on a concrete floor.
Yeah.
Or a metal floor as a human. Like,
yeah, I remember there was one small quote in Eating Animals where one of the farmers basically said like there aren't really pigs here that don't have sores on them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, hoof and foot injuries and sole bruising. So the gaps between the slatted floors and the roof edges can catch the pig's feet. Obviously, they're having to walk around on floors that have slats big enough for their waist to fall through. So it's a little precarious, I'm sure, and it's constant.
Right.
They also get lacerations and infections because the pigs can slip or get their legs caught in the slatted floors.
Which makes sense that they're slipping because there's poop on the floor, maybe water that they use to get the waste
or
through
urine.
The slats or urine.
Yeah. And then they also have an inability to root. So they have nowhere to go and nothing interesting to explore, which, like we said, can be really damaging to their health and well-being.
Another issue can be the air quality. So it's actually pretty dusty in a lot of these factory farms. And what makes this more problematic in like a pig factory farm is that the airborne dust usually carries hazardous gases like ammonia and hydrogen sulfide. So last week we got into some of the details of hydrogen sulfide, also known as H2S, which is a byproduct of manure decomposition. So manure is going to decompose, and when it decomposes, it creates H2S. H2S is an asphyxiant, which means it displaces oxygen in your body. In fact, OSHA has actually cited H2S as one of the leading causes of like industrial fatalities. That's how toxic it is. We also talked in the last episode about how even workers in these factory farms can die getting exposed to it. I think one of the stories we talked about was like 6 workers went down and passed away.
Yeah.
So yeah, if it can kill a human, it can also kill a pig.
Yeah.
Right? So you have H2S. You also have ammonia, which is also a result of decomposition.
Yeah, you don't often have a situation where ammonia is like the less bad thing.
Right, exactly, right?
Yeah.
Like, very toxic.
Yeah.
Right, so, like, the dust is carrying these toxins into the air where the pigs are, like, having to breathe it nonstop, and they're very confined. They just don't have a lot of space.
Right. Yeah.
And it gets very crowded in there. There's, like, a lot of manure decomposing.
Yeah.
So, yeah, the air quality is really bad, and we'll talk about some of the respiratory problems later in the episode, but just keep the air quality piece in mind.
Yeah. Also, a general lack of enrichment. So they don't have any soil, any grass, any branches, or like rooting materials that they can get a hold of, which causes a lot of general abnormal behaviors because that's a big part of their psychology.
Yeah. One of these abnormal behaviors is tail biting, which can result in injuries and infections. Tail biting is not considered a normal pig behavior, and some of the reasons tail biting can occur is overcrowding, boredom, stress, a lack of enrichment, poor ventilation, and inadequate diet. And then sometimes to prevent tail biting, factory farms are routinely cutting off piglets' tails without anesthesia.
Yeah, that's pretty sad. You know what else could prevent tail biting?
Is it ending factory farms?
Yeah, that could do it.
I agree.
Some other stress behaviors that pigs will often exhibit that are typically shown in animals that are suffering from deep psychological distress are bar biting, so biting on the bars of cages, sham chewing, which is basically they continuously make a chewing motion, but there's nothing in their mouth.
Yeah.
And then repetitive head movements.
Yeah, and then, these are similar to behaviors that you might see in, like, animals that are, like, in a zoo, confined in a zoo or something.
Yeah. Now, another small quote from the book Eating Animals says, "Many pigs go insane due to the confinement and obsessively chewing on their cage bars, incessantly press their water bottles, or drink urine. Others exhibit mourning behaviors that animal scientists describe as learned helplessness."
Coming back to the part about respiratory disease, this is another excerpt from the book Eating Animals. Fully 30 to 70% of the pigs will have some sort of respiratory infection by the time of slaughter. And mortality from respiratory disease alone can be 4 to 6%.
Yeah, so this is like a general trend, and this is, an idea that I read about in Eating Animals, but I've seen in other places where they really just keep the animals like in a healthy enough to survive until they go to slaughter. Like if they were in these conditions, they would not live very long,
right?
If they weren't sent off. So it's like they're not really trying to keep the animals healthy. They're just keeping them from the point where they're so sick they die before they can send them to slaughter.
Right, which they only make it to 6 months. So like you not very healthy. Like you don't have to keep them very healthy at all, right? Yeah, I mean, it's just the whole thing is kind of crazy. Like the fact that they're in bad enough air quality conditions that 30 to 70% are suffering from respiratory infection, and like so bad that 4 to 6% are dying from it. Those are staggering numbers. Indoor confinement increases the risk of pneumonia, influenza, and chronic coughing. So factors include dust, like we said, ammonia, and then also high stocking density, which is the term for it. This means that the pigs have no space and are kind of just living on top of each other. This can cause rapid airborne transmission of bacterial and viral agents throughout the herd. Yeah,
obviously. I mean, there are a ton of viruses that spread through environments like factory farming.
Right.
There's also the topic of lameness in general. And again, lameness is basically like you have an issue with your foot or your leg and you can't walk properly. So an Iowa State University study, which we will link in the show notes, found that about 86% of sows at slaughter had one or more foot lesions. Some of the frequently occurring issues were like joint injuries, hoof problems, leg weakness, and those affected both breeding sows and growing pigs.
A lot of this is caused by the hard and often slatted floors, but another contributing factor is the genetic breeding that has caused the pigs to grow like super fucking fast, and then the extra weight's bad for their joints and cartilage. Yeah. So like pretty much all man-made issues here.
Yeah, so even on a normal, stable, soft floor, they are heavier than their bodies would typically be able to support.
Right, because we've genetically bred them to gain weight faster for profitability.
We talked a little bit about the shortened lifespan, artificially shortened lifespans. So There's also a section on mortality statistics. So in the book Eating Animals, they said that by the time farmers begin weaning the piglets, 9 to 15% of them will have died. So major causes of this include crushing, which we talked about earlier, but is less likely in nature because the mother pig has more room to nest. Another cause is starvation. So the sows here are bred to produce unnaturally large litters. That often means that the smaller, weaker piglets will struggle to compete for their mother's milk and starve.
That is really sad to me.
Chilling, in which piglets are very susceptible to cold stress if the temperature is not well maintained, and that can turn into hypothermia. And obviously, the temperature is often not well maintained in a facility like this. And then disease in general. Overcrowded, unsanitary practices obviously promote the rapid spread of infectious diseases.
Also, many piglets are born with deformities. And another section from the book Eating Animals, common congenital diseases include cleft palate, hermaphroditism, inverted nipples, no anus, splayed legs, tremors, and hernias. Within the first 48 hours, their tails and their needle teeth are cut off without any pain relief in an attempt to minimize the wounds that pigs will inflict on one another, which obviously isn't because they care about the pigs getting harmed. It's because it's like another money thing. They don't want to lose any of the pigs because they need to sell them.
Right. And also, after 10 days, male pigs will often have their testicles removed without pain relief. And then in terms of sow health, the long-term breeding females might experience lameness, shoulder lesions, reduced body condition, and chronic injuries. Some of the same kind of things we've already talked about. But these are for the pigs specifically that they are using to breed.
So much of pig farming specifically revolves around the female pigs giving birth incredibly frequently. So I think it's like really important to cover this topic fully. Side note, only 3% of pigs breed naturally in factory farms. So the other 97% are artificially inseminated. In nature, mother pigs or sows are incredibly maternal. About 24 hours before giving birth, wild sows become extremely active. They may travel long distances searching for the perfect nesting site. They spend several hours building elaborate nests made out of grass, branches, leaves, straw, and other vegetation. And then, this behavior is driven by hormones and occurs even if they've never seen another pig do it, which I thought was interesting.
That isn't.
It's like very instinctive.
Yeah.
So yeah, they're in their nesting phase. Like they know they're about to give birth. They go and they build like the perfect nest for their little piglets. It's very sweet.
So the European Food Safety Authority, which has that detailed study we referenced earlier and we'll include in the show notes, identifies nest building as an essential maternal behavior. And it recommends sufficient nesting materials such as long stem straw or hay. So that's what happens in nature. The way it works in the factory farm is typically, like we talked about, the sow's moved into a farrowing crate, which is that metal enclosure that restricts their movement. She often can't even turn around, walk freely, obviously gather any nesting material, build a nest. So these practices basically prevent every instinct that the mother pig has.
Yeah. It's like she wants to go do all these things. She knows she's about to give birth. She knows that her babies are going to need a nest, and she can't even turn around. When in the wild, when the piglets are born, the mother will communicate constantly with them through vocalizations. The babies will nurse whenever they want. The mother and the babies are able to interact freely, and then the mother will guide and protect the piglets. And the piglets even recognize the voice of their mother, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah, I never heard about that. That's interesting. So in the factory farming situation, again, the crates basically restrict almost all of those normal interactions. There's metal bars in between them so that the babies can access the milk, but the mother can't really move, turn around, mostly interact with the piglets at all.
Which, this section makes me the most sad. I mean, we don't have kids, we're not having kids, but like just the idea that like you could just give birth to like a litter of piglets that you've been thinking about for like 100 days, like you've been pregnant for like 100 days, and you give birth to these piglets. And then, I feel like there's not even, from what I read, barely any like skin to skin contact. Like they don't even get to like interact even at all.
Yeah.
They're just immediately like put on the other side of like the metal grating or bars or whatever. So it's incredibly sad.
Yeah, so in the wild, piglets will nurse frequently. They typically remain with their mother. They kind of start to gradually explore. They'll usually nurse for 10 to 17 weeks, with weaning occurring naturally, obviously.
So 17 weeks is like a little over 4 months.
Right.
And then in factory farms, pigs don't even get to live to be 6 months. So like in nature, they basically have like 7 weeks off the nip.
And then male piglets will usually disperse from the family group around 8 to 10 months of age to live the bachelor life until they find a mate.
So in nature, female piglets often remain with their mother, joining the core maternal herd to help raise the future generation of pigs. So like, just to recap, the male piglets, they don't even normally leave the family group until like 8 to 10 months old, which would be after they're slaughtered from a factory farm. And kind of the same with the piglets. Sometimes they stay for years, I read, with their mom.
Yeah.
Helping raise the next generation. In reality, U.S. factory farm piglets are typically weaned between 17 and 21 days. That's like 3 weeks or less. Versus in nature, it's 10 to 17 weeks. But it's not uncommon for them to be separated from their mothers at 14 days or less.
Yeah.
And because the piglet's digestive system and immune systems aren't fully developed at this young age, the sudden transition into like real food can cause a lot of stress and create complications like diarrhea.
Yeah. So just in general, these animals don't do almost anything like they do in the wild.
Yeah.
So this episode was mostly about the like standard and intentional practices of the factory farm. We didn't really get into some of the even darker topics like the individual abuses and like malicious actions and other things like that sometimes happen on farms. There are a lot of documentaries out there where you can see that kind of thing, but this was more about like this is just like how the farms operate as a business.
Yeah, these are the things that you can go find out right now about a factory farm that a factory farm is publishing. So if you want to learn a little bit more about this, I would really recommend reading the book Eating Animals. There are a few good sections that cover pig factory farming. Some of the details in those sections of the book are pretty horrific. And more than we wanted to cover on the podcast, we wanted to keep it focused on like standard practices. I think there are many books, many articles, many documentaries that can do a much better job showing like how grim it really is in a factory farm. I barely got through this podcast without crying, so I don't think I would be able to do it justice. And the material is already there, so I would say go check those out if you want more information.
So, I think we're just going to leave it there for the main topic and talk about some updates we have for deficient vegans in general. Our book club is wrapping up. We'll be putting a poll into the Discord soon to vote on the book for the next quarter.
Yeah. And so I would say Eating Animals was a pretty heavy book, just like the topic of this podcast. I think the 3 choices we're going to go with for options are probably going to be a little bit lighter this time because I know that we've traumatized a lot of people in our Discord with Eating Animals. So we're probably going to move on to like a little bit lighter of a vegan book next quarter if you want to join. We also have a mailing list. Technically, we have 3 mailing lists. We have one for muscle deficient vegan if you want information on like fitness, nutrition. We have one for protein deficient vegan. That's me.
I've heard of her.
Yeah, it's like mostly recipes, tips and tricks for cooking and stuff like that. And then we have one for this podcast, which is the deficient vegans as a whole. The deficient vegans one kind of ties in our 2 brands, plus veganism is the center of it, but we also include like a recipe we're liking in the newsletter and maybe some other stuff.
We'll add sign-up links for those in the show notes and briefly mention what each weekly newsletter covers. Protein Deficient Vegan also has a free vegan protein guide ebook that we'll link in the show notes in case that would be useful for anybody listening or anybody you know.
Yeah, it's 110 pages. We're hoping it's a really useful resource, a useful free resource to like anyone that is vegan and maybe having trouble figuring out the whole protein thing, or anyone that's trying to go vegan. It has 40 of my most popular high protein recipes, including like breakfast, lunch, dinner, and snack recipes. It has sample weekly meal plans for 1,500, 2,000, 2,500, and 3,000 calories if that might be helpful for you. Also has a grocery store list with my favorite vegan protein staples, some cost and protein percentage analysis charts so that you can choose foods that were like within your budget and also your macros. There's a section on things to know about going vegan, some more resources, a section for resources where you can find more information about veganism, some tips and tricks for going vegan, and then just some of my personal tips for like cooking vegan proteins if you're just getting started.
Yeah. So Be sure to follow us on social media. Instagram is the one we tend to be most active on, but we're also on TikTok and YouTube.
And Facebook, sadly.
Yeah, and Facebook. So those links are in the show notes as well. We do share a lot of informational carousels and news from our new news segments. We also have some blog posts on Deficient Vegans. Some of the podcast episodes have a kind of companion blog post. Some of the blog posts may eventually be things that were not necessarily on the podcast. We're trying to make that a vegan hub, basically. So if you enjoyed this and you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, if you could rate and leave us a review, that really helps the podcast get out there. And then if you're listening on Spotify or YouTube, you can also leave a comment if you have any questions or any feedback or anything you want to hear about on future episodes. All right. Well, I think that's it. Do you want to say bye?
Bye, guys.
Bye, everybody.